All right, happy weekend to you. You should be watching this video before you come to class on Monday. If you're one of those kids watching the video in class on Monday, for shame, for shame. Okay? So, here are our four transformations on our sine or our cosine curve. Remember that A is the vertical stretch or the vertical shrink, okay, the vertical accordion, if you will. B is the horizontal accordion, okay, the horizontal stretch or the horizontal shrink. C is the horizontal shift, so that's going to move our graph left or right, and we think opposite with C because it's inside the parentheses. D is our vertical shift. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is that vertical shift, along with a combinations of A, B's, and C's to help us out and get us through. Okay? So, here we go. First one today. Okay? -3 sine of pi x plus pi. First thing that I am going to do is I am going to factor out pi from inside the parentheses of the sine. Then I look at my key things. First key thing is I want to know my amplitude. Amplitude is this number right there, so that's going to be a 3. My middle is going to be this number out here. This D value is going to be my middle. So my middle here is 0. This is going to be the only example today where we don't have a D value. The other two will have one. Which then tells me where my low value is. Subtract middle minus amplitude gets me my low. My high value is middle plus my amplitude, so that's 3. Then I look at my period here, remember, is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B. So in this case, that is 2 pi divided by pi, which gets me a period of 2. So this one's going to be a little different than the ones we were doing on Friday, because the ones that we were doing on Friday had pi in them. Now our period is just going to be a number, so we're just going to have numeric values for our x-axes. Our starting value is our C value, and we think oppositely on that one. So if plus 1, so I'm going to start actually at -1, which then start plus period gets me my end, so I'm going to end at +1. Okay? So I can actually move this vertical axis, my y-axis if you will, I can move to the middle because it's going to be a middle one. Sine starts in the middle, then it goes up to the high point, back to the middle, down to the low point, back to the middle. But because of the fact that I have a negative A value there, it's a reflection, so it's actually going to start in the middle, go down, back to the middle, up, and back down. Now you can fill in your values, or if you started with your values and then put your curve on again, those can be done in either order. So our low value here is -3, our middle value was 0, and our high value was +3. Horizontally, we started at -1. We ended at +1. our middle value would also be 0. And then if you wanted to get the quarters, because they're easy in this case, negative 1/2, positive 1/2. And there is the graph of y equals negative 3 sine of the quantity pi x plus pi. Okay. Moving on to our last transformation. Now, here, it's written a little differently. If you wanted to rewrite this as y equals 4 cosine of 1/2 x minus 2, that would be the same thing. Order doesn't matter in addition, so we can rewrite it like that and not change anything in terms of our graph. Okay? So then, amplitude is 4. But now, here we have a middle term of negative 2. So that moves my middle. Really, it goes to y equals negative 2. More than likely, you're just going to write negative 2, which is just fine. Okay. So then now my low point would be negative 2 minus the amplitude. So that would be negative 6. The high point would be negative 2 plus the amplitude, which would be positive 2. Okay. I'm going to slide this down just a little bit. My period is going to be 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. b in this case is 1/2. 2 pi divided by 1/2 tells me that the period is 4 pi. Start value is what's inside the parentheses after the x. There's nothing there, so I'm going to start at 0, which means I will then end at 4 pi. Okay. Only tweak that I would make to this graph is I would probably just extend it down a little bit lower, just because of the fact that it's going to be a little bit of a lower graph. So now, here what we're going to do is we are going to start by putting our middle value in of negative 2. And what Mrs. Hill and I both like to do is we both like to draw a little dashed line across there, because that's our middle point that we're always going to come back to. Okay? So if we draw that line across there, that now becomes, we want to lock in our x-axis, but this now becomes our middle point when we come back to it. So now, when I go to my graph, my high point is going to be up here at 2, because this amplitude right here, this spot right there, that distance needs to be 4. From my middle to my high point is my amplitude. So that distance is 4, which means then down on the bottom, we would also go down to negative 6 for my low point. This is a cosine curve with a positive a value. So it's going to start up at the top, come down to the bottom, go back up to the top. So now then my middle point would be here. My ending point would be there. So that would be 4 pi there, 0 there, which makes 2 pi there. But now here, because it's got to line up with there, would be my quarter. And 3 pi right there. Okay. Okay. All right. So I would like you to try this one, pause the video, and then come back to me explaining it. So what I would like you to do right now is pause the video, graph this one, come back. When you unpause it, I will start explaining it. So I would write this as y equals 2 times the sine of negative 1/4 times the quantity x minus 4 pi plus 3. Okay. Just a quick check. When you distribute this in back here, you should get negative 1/4 x plus pi. Negative 1/4 times x gets me the negative 1/4 x. Negative 1/4 times the negative 4 pi gets me positive pi up there. Now that negative sign right here will come into play in a little bit. Just remember that it's there. We'll put a little asterisk by it. Okay? So my amplitude is 2. Just down a little bit. Which puts my middle, or this over here puts my middle at 3. Amplitude minus, or middle minus amplitude gets me my low, so that's going to be a low at 1. Middle plus amplitude puts the high at 5. Okay. Period is going to be 2 pi divided by 1/4. Because we take the absolute value there, that should be a 4. So 2 pi divided by 1/4 has my period here as 8 pi. Start value is opposite of that one, so that's going to be 4 pi. 4 pi plus 8 pi tells me that my end is at 12 pi. Okay. So I am all above the x-axis. Oops, grab onto it. So I'm going to move that down a little bit. I'm going to move this over just a little bit to graph basically in what looks like in quadrant 1. Now again, if you wanted to, I'll put it in, we'll put it in purple here. If you wanted to do the squiggly line there to signify that you're going out to 4 pi, that would be great to do. Okay? Now I told you that this negative sign right here is going to come into play because we're going to have to use an identity, and one of the identities off of our unit circle said that when we have the sine of negative t, that is equal to the negative, oops, I forgot the negative, negative sine of t. I believe that it is identity number 2 on your unit circle. So that is going to reflect my sine graph. Okay? Now, side note here, negative b values reflect sine curves. Negative b values do nothing to cosine curves. Okay, so a negative b value will only reflect the sine curve. This is a sine curve, so it is going to reflect it. So instead of starting and going up, I'm going down, and then back up. So that puts me, my middle here then would be 3. We'll put our line in all the way across there. Okay, so there's my middle. Here, my low value then would be 1. My high value then would be 5. I started at 4 pi. We ended at 12 pi. 12 pi plus 4 pi is 16 pi. Divided by 2 is 8 pi. 4 pi plus 8 pi is 12 pi. Divided by 2 is 6 pi. 8 plus 12 is 20. Divided by 2 is 10. So there is our curve. Hope you had a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.